Let's get into some tight end tiers, and tier 1 starts with a man that is clearly in his own tier, and that is Travis Kelce. No surprise there. He is the only tight end that you will see go in the first round of mock drafts, assuming you're not a maniac in a tight end premium league. I mean, Barry, what else is there left to say about what Kelce's done in fantasy?
The only thing to say about Kelce is that last year he was 100 fantasy points better than number 2, than tight end number 2.
50% more points than anyone else.
Right. It's not that he was the best tight end in fantasy. He was the best tight end in fantasy by a wide margin, and it's because he gives you such an advantage at the position every week. That's why he's worth a first-round pick this year. That's the only thing you can say about Kelce that hasn't already been said.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I will say about Kelce, adding another thing to be said, is that I think he had 12 touchdowns last year. He had 12 touchdowns. 7 of those came in 2 games. 4 against the Raiders, I think 4 against the Chargers, 3 against the Raiders. So he didn't have any touchdowns in the last 6 weeks of the season. So I don't think that Travis Kelce is just no longer going to score touchdowns, but I think the touchdown production is maybe a little bit unsustainable, but he's still the number 1 tight end by margin.
What I would say, what Travis Kelce is to the Chiefs offense is what our camera guys are to the fantasy football happy hour.
Irreplaceable.
Yeah, good for you.
Irreplaceable.
Show can't go on without them.
Show cannot go on without them.
Okay, yep. No,
Let's get into tier 2 here. And now this one, a little bigger, but not by much. Pretty special group here led by Mark Andrews, followed by T.J. Hockenson, who since his trade from the Lions to the Vikings, it just seems like there's so much more on his plate from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah, 1,000%. So, both guys last year averaging 12.7 fantasy points per game. Andrews, second most end zone targets among tight ends. He was 4th in red zone targets, 28% target share. Oh, by the way, they're going to be a much better offense this year under Todd Monken. And T.J. Hockenson, if you just look at the numbers, he was very good, and that was him just showing up and trying to learn where the locker room is. So now he's had a full offseason to be involved with Kevin O'Connell's offense, to get more familiar with Kirk Cousins. And look, we like Jordan Addison, we like KJ Osborne, but after Justin Jefferson, I think there's a very strong argument to be made that the second best pass catcher on that team is going to be T.J. Hockenson, and we know how pass-friendly, fantasy-friendly O'Connell's Vikings team is. So I do think Hockenson is in that same tier 2 with Mark Andrews.
Yep, I agree. And also Christian Darrisaw was banged up at the end of last season. He is the best player on that offensive line by margin. So if he's healthier, that should help them. If T.J. Hockenson could just play the Giants every week, because the 2 games against the Giants, he had 23 receptions on 27 targets. Just absolutely lit them up. The other thing with Mark Andrews too is that, if you're just looking through last year's stats, you might forget that Mark Andrews, he was playing, but he wasn't right physically last year. He was just constantly on the injury report. Yeah. Also didn't have Lamar Jackson the last effectively 6 games of the season. So I think that Mark Andrews will have a big bounce back and will separate himself as he was going into the last year, the clear guy behind Kelce.
Just like Travis Kelce, just like a couple of the other guys we're going to talk here, Mark Andrews has a legit chance to lead his team in targets. Yep. The passing offense goes through him, or he's a big part of it, and he's certainly always a threat when they get in close to the end zone. So, friend of the podcast, Mark Andrews, we agree. He's my number 2. I have Hockenson at 3, but I think they're in a tier by themselves.
Yep.
All right, that takes us to tier 3, where this is where it opens up a little bit. Darren Waller, now with the Giants, leads off this tier at number 4. We've talked about how excited we are about him, and we will expand on him in just a second. But George Kittle, who's kind of been a mainstay in the fantasy landscape at the tight end position for years now. Kyle Pitts, the very unpredictable Kyle Pitts under Arthur Smith, and then followed by Dallas Goedert, of course, of the Eagles' crowded pass-catching group.
And I don't mind Jenny, I have these ranked Waller, Kittle, Pitts, Goddard, but if you took Goddard ahead of Pitts because you're just I got burned by him too many times, I'm done, I get that. If you wanted to draft Kittle over Waller, I get that. That's why we put these guys in tiers. So this is how I've ranked them, but I think they're all fairly close. They all have things that you're a little nervous about, but they all have tremendous talent and upside.
Yeah, I mean, we're only 2 years removed from Kyle Pitts having 110 targets and over 1,000 receiving yards as a rookie. Right. And I wonder, just watching Marcus Mariota in the preseason, maybe if you should feel a bit better about Kyle Pitts, because maybe he has someone now who could a bit more versatility to actually throw him the ball. So I think the Pitts obviously has a ton of upside. And then Darren Waller.
Yeah, by the way, we make fun of Arthur Smith for running the ball so much, but maybe we've seen this, and we're maybe he's seeing this in practice, and Arthur Smith is my only chance of winning is to not let this guy throw.
It really makes you think.
He's missing guys by 10 yards.
Yeah.
He didn't look like an NFL quarterback out there.
No.
It's weird. And then what you were saying about Darren Waller.
Well, I just think that Darren Waller, in 2020 he had 107 receptions, 1196 yards, 9 touchdowns. Like, he was an absolute monster, and then he just hasn't been healthy since then. And he's 30 now, so I think that he still has good years left in him. And you just know that Brian Daboll in that offense is going to maximize Darren Waller.
Well, here's the other thing about Darren Waller, right? So he's a mismatch nightmare. He led all tight ends in end zone targets per game last season, and I think this is the most important thing when you bring up Brian Daboll. 60% of his routes last year came from the slot. Just like we talk about with Kelce, maybe Mark Andrews as well, Darren Waller is a guy that has a legit shot to lead his team in targets. He's the best pass-catching weapon the Giants have. And so when you think about Daboll, and especially Daniel Jones, what's he good at? Throwing between the numbers. So I think Waller, yes, he needs to stay healthy, and yes, he's 30, but he's also a guy that isn't 30 in typical NFL years, because very well documented story about when he was drafted by the Ravens and he had some personal issues, and so there were a number of years where he didn't play a lot of games, and so he has figured everything out. He has righted himself. If you ever get a chance to check out Darren Waller's personal story, it's awesome. It's an amazing journey. He's one of my personal favorite players in the NFL. I love the guy. I've been on his podcast. He's amazing. But from a fantasy football perspective, I do think he was a very key acquisition for Daniel Jones and Brian Daboll and that offense. That's why I have him at 4, which is higher than consensus.
Yep.
I think he's going to have a monster year.
Yep, agreed. Well, Saquon Barkley led the team in targets
last year. Correct.
Yeah. So there's going to be targets for for non-running backs.
No, look, whatever. Cole Beasley in this offense in Buffalo and got over 100 targets, easy. And all due respect to Cole Beasley, he ain't Darren Waller.
Yep.
Barry, on the George Kittle front, how much of it is a difference going into this year, knowing Brock Purdy is the starter and what we've seen them be able to do together versus last year, the unpredictable nature of Trey Lance?
That certainly helps, right? And there was definitely a connection. I want to say, this is off the top of my head, but I believe that of the 11 touchdowns that George Kittle had last year, 7 of them came from Brock Purdy. He absolutely killed Seattle. So that gives you confidence. But it was a weird year last year, right? So again, they went through 3 different quarterbacks. Chris McCaffrey joins halfway through. Deebo Samuel is banged up, and so Kittle, this is why he's so valuable as an NFL player, but hurts him a little bit when you get into fantasy, is that he's a really good blocker. Yeah. He's just an unbelievable blocker, which is great, but it just means because you have so versatile, because there's so many things you can do offensively with Deebo and Ayuk and McCaffrey, that maybe they keep Kittle into block more, right? Is my concern is does he get to 11 touchdowns? Because Kittle has been sort of up and down as a touchdown scorer throughout his career. So that's, again, you have to nitpick at this level. He's my tight end 5. I feel like I'm talking Kittle down. I'm at tight end 5, but that's why I have Waller over Kittle, is I'm a little nervous that this offense doesn't use Kittle as much as they did last year, that because with everyone healthy and now a full season McCaffrey, Elijah Mitchell, I know he's banged up too, but they've got a lot of mouths to feed in San Francisco.
Yeah, I wonder as well, because Purdy clearly had a connection with Kittle at the end of the year. They had 7, Purdy threw 7 touchdowns to him in the last 4 regular season games. I just wonder how much, we forget that 2 years ago, Deebo Samuel was the 3rd best skill position player in football behind Cooper Kupp and Jonathan Taylor.
Yes.
And he never really established that rapport with Purdy because he was hurt a little bit, and then he comes back and he had a monster game in the playoffs against Seattle. And I just wonder if Deebo is the guy who, I think Deebo is the most talented skill position player on that team alongside Christian McCaffrey. I think he's just more explosive than Kittle and then Brandon Ayuk. And I just wondered with a full offseason whether they featured Deebo more, potentially at the expense of Kittle.
And we talked about Ayuk the other day. Over the second half of the year or something like that, Ayuk was a top 15 fantasy wide receiver. Again, the Niners are loaded, which gives you feel good about Brock Purdy's fantasy prospects, just because all he needs to do is just get it somewhere near a guy, and they're going to run 20 yards after the catch.
In a great scheme.
It's unbelievable, right? But my point is you discount it a little bit because Kittle's a tight end, so the bar for success is lower. But yes, there are a lot of. You feel better about where Darren Waller is pecking order-wise compared to all the Giant skill players than Kittle, who's got to compete with Deebo and Ayuk and McCaffrey for touches.
Yeah, Kittle needs touchdowns to provide his value.
Let's jump into Tier 4. If you want to wait a little longer on addressing the tight end position, this is kicked off by Pat Freiermuth, who's had an impressive first 2 seasons for the Steelers. Definitely a rapport with Kenny Pickett. Evan Ingram, who just got the contract extension from Jacksonville after a career season in Doug Peterson's offense. Of course, David Njoku, a mainstay for the Browns offense. Dalton Schultz now with the Texans. on an offense that has a lot of room if you're a pass catcher. And then this is closed out, this group, by the steady Eddie of Tyler Higbee in the Rams offense.
Higbee's just being left for dead in drafts. And I mean, like, they've got Cooper Kupp and literally nothing else. And I promise you, if nothing else, the Sean McVay offense is going to pass. And given the struggles of that team, like, I think they're going to be down in a lot of games. Like, I think Higbee is a value this year. A couple other guys that I want to bring up there, like you mentioned Njoku. We talked about him a little earlier with the Brown struggles, and certainly Watson's preseason doesn't give you a lot of great feelings. But last year was a really breakout year for David Njoku, who had the second most red zone targets among tight ends. Still the same offense, right? Cleveland 4th in tight end target share last season. They were 6th in total tight end targets. Njoku a target share of almost 19% in 11 of the 14 games. He's also another guy that's just a great blocker. So he's somebody that's going to be on the field quite a bit. And as we talk about competition for targets, we talked about earlier, like, again, I know Lawrence, I think Lawrence has like a second-round grade on Donovan Peoples-Jones. But other than Lawrence Jackson, we sit here and go, like, after Amari Cooper, there's not a lot there. We like the potential of Cedric Tillman.
Right. Much be your way.
But I think after Amari Cooper, David Njoku is the best pass catcher on that team. And so, I mean, he's somebody that I have him at tight end 10. I think he's a, low-end tight end 1. Good player.
Yeah. The thing as well, last year, the specific way Deshaun Watson struggled, he struggled in a lot of regards, but the specific way that he did is he couldn't throw the ball deep. There was just no deep completions at all. So tight end David Njoku might be a little bit more protected against that with the shorter intermediate throws.
Tier 5, our final tier here for the tight ends, is kicked off by Gerald Everett at 13, Cole Kmet at 14, and then 15, Juwan Johnson. Let's stick with this group of 3 before we go deeper into a group that has a lot of rookies. Gerald Everett here, Barry, feels kind of like your Tyler Higbee argument in a sense that he's completely overlooked despite how productive he could be for the Chargers offense playing with Justin Herbert.
It's a weird one on Gerald Everett. I think maybe it's because he's a big name, and also there's that nationally televised game where he dropped he was just exhausted, and he made kind of that boneheaded play, and just, but the fact of the matter is this is a guy who was top 8 in the NFL among tight ends in both targets and receptions last year. You think about this offense under new coordinator Kellen Moore, the 2 years that Kellen Moore was in Dallas, Dalton Schultz was a top 7 tight end in points per game over the last 2 years under Kellen Moore. Everett is a weapon. There is a connection there with Justin Herbert. I'm at tight end 13, but he's one of my, if you sort of punt on an early round tight end, he's one of my favorite guys to get later in drafts. I've said this about tight end for the season. I want to either be one of the first guys in my league to get a tight end. I want to, a Kelce and Andrews, a Hockenson, one of those guys. Or I want to be one of the last guys in my league to draft a tight end. This is assuming non-tight end premium scoring, because you've got guys like Njoku and Everett that are Higbee that you can get late.
Yeah, and they're all unexciting, but Tyler Higbee last year had 108 targets. Gerald Everett every week just feels like he's going to be 5 receptions for 40 yards with like a 33% chance at a touchdown.
Yeah.
And people are going to want to draft Dalton Kincaid in front of Gerald Everett, but Gerald Everett, I think, is more likely just to have the better fantasy season.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Jay, how about Juwan Johnson coming in there on 15 before we go deeper into this list? I mean, this is somebody who was incredibly productive in the second half of last season, and now the Saints get a little bit more stability at the quarterback position in Derek Carr, despite this being a crowded tight end room.
Yeah, I mean, he's just a touchdown machine. Juwan Johnson had the 7 touchdowns last season, despite missing a game. You would like him to have more target volume. He only had 65 targets last year, but I think the underrated thing with the Saints, and the reason that you should be buying Saints stock, is just their schedule is they play like the 3 of us every single week.
Right.
It's absolutely insane how easy it is. So they're just going to be, even if they're not that good, they're going to be in scoring position so much, and Juwan Johnson has shown that he can be an absolute weapon when you get close to the end zone.
Juwan Johnson, over the final 10 games of last year, week 7 on, he was the 8th best fantasy quarterback on a points per game basis. To your point, he has 55 receptions the last 2 years. He has 11 touchdowns on those 55 receptions, right? 20% of his catches have gone for touchdowns. He is a touchdown machine. He was a free agent this year. The Saints signed him to a real deal and brought him back. The concerns are they also signed Jimmy Graham, and you're like, what are we doing?
He's going to get 6 touchdowns.
Right, and I was just like,
not to retire, by the way.
Right, and we thought, oh, this is nice. Jimmy Graham, he's going to sign a one-day contract with the Saints and retire as the Saints. That's right, he should. He's royalty in New Orleans. Oh no, they want him to play football. I'm like, wait, what? Right? I mean, like, is this a Marvin Jones? Like, is Jimmy Graham the oldest wide receiver in the NFL? I know, that whole thing about he wanted to be qualified as a wide receiver. So that's the concern, is does he vulture a couple of touchdowns? Taysom Hill, who also qualifies at tight end, he's always a threat as well. We don't know about the health of Michael Thomas or the running backs other than Jamal Williams in New Orleans. So a lot is unknown. But I will tell you, Juwan Johnson is a great red zone threat. The Saints paid him real money to have him come back. And randomly, he's a TikTok star. I swear to God, he's got an account with his wife, and they've got like 2 million followers. He's a massive TikTok star, Juwan Johnson.
Stock up on Juwan Johnson.
Unbelievable.
I'm just saying, for the kids out there that are on the talk.
ADP rising
like
as we
me,
speak.
I'm on the top. I know you guys are like whatever, blah, blah, blah. But for those of us that are in the know, that are in the hip, that are, on the talk, as we call it.
On the talk, on the peacock, what can't you do?
Yeah, exactly.
Let's pull up Tier 5
one
more time.
You think they would let me shorten Peacock's name?
I don't reckon they would.
No, that one probably doesn't make the cut.
I wouldn't have thought so.
Interesting. All right. Just give it a nickname. Make it hipper. You know what I mean? It's something to think about.
Hunter Henry?
Yeah.
Looking at the back end of Tier 5 here, Barry, who jumps out?
Hunter Henry jumps out to.
There we go.
Hunter Henry, listen. As you sit here and look at the list, I have Luke Musgrave at 22. I'm too low on him. When my rankings update comes out on Monday after all the preseason games, Musgrave's going to jump up. Like, he's getting a lot of buzz, rightfully so. You know me. I'm obsessed with Luke Musgrave this year. I'm also obsessed with Hunter Henry. He's too low on this list. I'm going to move him up as well. Tied for the team lead in red zone targets last year, 76% snap rate last year. Mike Gesicki already banged up. Bill O'Brien likes to use 2 tight end sets. He likes to use 12 personnel quite a bit. There's a connection between Hunter Henry and Mac Jones. I think Hunter Henry has a big year this year. I really do.
I agree. And also, he only had the 2 touchdowns last year, but I can tell you for a fact that game against Minnesota, he caught a 3rd touchdown, and that getting reversed,
he did.
That cost me a lot of money, but that was a touchdown, so he actually had 3 touchdowns on the year. Also, I'm buying a little bit of a Mac Jones mini resurgence, not a renaissance, but just a mini resurgence.
There's nowhere to go but up.
He's been written off. He was excellent his rookie year.
Correct.
And we're not far enough removed from that to dismiss him. Don't love the offensive line and what's going on there, but I think there is a little bit of upside.
They were a disaster last year offensively with Patricia and Joe Judge and what's going on, right? Bill O'Brien, regardless of what you think about his time in Houston as a head coach / general manager, the fact is Bill O'Brien's a good offensive mind. That he has traditionally been a good offensive mind. Houston always had a good offense under Bill O'Brien, and I think being able to focus just on this offense, I'm not saying they're going to be great. They're still going to be a conservative offense, right? It's they're still probably going to be the 4th worst offense in that division, but it's not going to be a train wreck. I agree. I don't know that Mac Jones is going to be a fantasy option this year, except in deep 2 quarterback leagues, but he's going to be a much better NFL quarterback this year, and he's going to be good enough to get the Hunter Henrys of the world, the Ramondre Stevensons, the Juju Smith-Schusters. He's going to be able to keep the offense competent enough to have fantasy production for the skilled players we care about.
Yep, and in Mac Jones' rookie year, Hunter Henry was tight end 10 on the season, had 9 touchdowns, and that is in the realm of possibilities, clearly.
Thank you.
Barry, you brought up in your updated rankings, Luke Musgrave is going to make a jump. Will he be the highest-rated rookie tight end or still behind the likes of Dalton Kincaid or Sam Laporta?
I think I'll move him ahead of Laporta, which is crazy to think about. I mean, he'll be right there with Laporta. I got to crunch the numbers. I can't put him ahead of Kincaid, obviously, because we expect Kincaid, in essence, to be the slot receiver.
With a better quarterback.
With a better quarterback and a better offense. But, I mean, we expect Laporta to be the starting tight end, but again, the Lions, in theory, once Jameson Williams comes back, and I know he's already banged, I think there's less target competition for Luke Musgrave in Green Bay than there is for Sam Laporta in Detroit, because Sam Laporta is going to have to deal with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jahmyr Gibbs, if not, potentially at some point Jameson Williams and Marvin Jones. Marvin Jones.
Don't laugh.
Right? No. Marvin Jones is a professional wide receiver. Josh Reynolds had some moments last year. Whereas after Christian Watson in Green Bay, you got Aaron Jones out of the backfield. But it's it's Romeo Doubs. It's like Jaden Reed. There's a much better opportunity, I think, path to a bigger target share for Luke Musgrave. And again, just the it's all training camp hype, but like it's kind of eye-popping seeing some of these clips out of Packers camp in terms of and like the speed's not a joke. I mean, coming out of college, Connor.
Insanely fast, 6'6", and can run like that. He could almost run like a wide receiver at that height. And the fact that he was drafted in the second round, the usage in practice, he's on the field with the start. Like, this is their tight end, right?
Right.
And yes, they drafted 2 tight ends, but this is the guy, and he is not a blocker. So if he's on the field all the time, say what you want about LaFleur, he's a good coach, and he's been a really good coach, and he'll understand that he needs to use him as a pass
So, like, my buddy Dwayne McFarland, who does a bunch of great job for FantasyLife.com, he does his utilization report, right? And so he looks at utilization. He just said, like, he looked at Luke Musgrave played almost every single snap with the starters in the preseason game for the Packers, right? And I expect a similar usage. Again, like there was a clip the other day where they used Luke Musgrave on a jet sweep.
Which is wild.
It went for like 7 yards, but like that's the guy that that normally you see in Tyreek Hill, like the guy the Packers are using on a jet sweep is freaking Luke Musgrave because he is that fast. And so like good luck to a linebacker keeping up with that. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBC Sports and RotoWorld.com. Just want to thank you so much for watching what you just watched, or at least being too lazy to click out of it after the autoplay just kept it going. So either way, thank you so much for just letting it scroll by your screen. And now I'd like to ask you respectfully, okay? Respectfully, please subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel for the latest NFL news, fantasy headlines from RotoWorld, and betting analysis from NBC Sports Edge.